Welcome to the Trueface podcast. My name is Robby, and I'll be your guide as we have conversations about what we can learn from what's going on in our lives. Most of us get stuck in our relationships with God and others, and we end up wondering, is this really all there is to it? Here's a question. What if God isn't who you think he is, and neither are you? The grace-based relational discipleship resources at trueface.org will help you answer that, to help you live into your true identity. And that's our hope in this conversation, that whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, that this encourages you as you follow Jesus. And thank you for being a part of this tribe and sharing and liking this podcast. So I'm excited about this one. This is overdue. This has been a long time coming. I get to introduce you to one of my closest friends, Scott Bowen. Scott, welcome, man, finally to the Trueface podcast.
It is a true honor to be here. Thank you, Robby, for having me. I'm excited to get on the hot seat.
Get ready, buddy. Get ready. If anybody wants to really ask the last 1% questions or know about me, just text, email Scott. He knows them all. But I'm going to start and introduce Scott in a unique way. That game, Two Truths and a Lie? I'm going to give like 6 statements, and there's going to be one lie in this statement. Just to introduce you to one of the most interesting men who you would never assume walking down the street is the most interesting man. But I'll give you some random notes about Scott, and there's one lie in here. So Scott's been married to Addie for 22 years, and he's got 3 kids. One of those kids is adopted. That's all one statement. He is a real estate mogul and coach to real estate investors. He started a soccer discipleship ministry in Uganda. He has written a family book that you can find on Amazon called Here's a Question. It's questions for you to discuss with your family and ask your family questions. He is wise like me, and he is also a Florida Gator, and he also has multiple failed e-commerce businesses in his wake. Scott, what is the lie?
Well, the true lie is I'm not wise. And I'm not a Florida Gator, nor do I want to be wherever we'll be.
Hence the lack of wisdom. Everything else, people, is a truth. So
it is true.
That's the first. I think I might do that intro for all the guests.
There you go. Let's do it.
And he's not even a soccer player. Like, I was the soccer player, and I met this guy. We've been doing life together for probably 10 years. And I met this guy, and they're like, oh, you got to meet Scott. And so I don't know who connected us, and we met. And, like, he started this soccer discipling ministry in Uganda. And I was like, oh, this guy's my hero. I'm so jealous. Like, that's what I would want to do with my life as a soccer player. And then I was underwhelmed because he wasn't even a soccer player. But Scott, we were talking in my office this week, and we were hanging out as friends. And what you were unpacking about what you've been experiencing and processing in regards to fellowship is why I wanted you to come on the podcast, so that we can unpack this with some of my friends and what you've been learning. And it's connected to Champions United, your ministry. But before we jump into what we're going to talk about today, which I'm really intrigued to unpack based on our 15 minutes of talking about this earlier in the week. But first, fill in any gaps of my intro, but give us some context as to the journey of Champions United, when you started it, what that ministry is, because it's a ministry I love and support.
Yeah, for sure. And like you, I think one of the things that kind of ties our hearts together is this idea that we can be ministry people, but then also business people, and we can kind of dance on both sides of the coin. And that's been true for me. I certainly, when I, came out of college and started working, I was in commercial real estate, and did that for about 11 years. And during that time, someone just offered an invitation. Hey, we're going to Zambia, and there was 3 guys and they wanted a 4th. And so I tagged along the trip. Didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. But that one decision to say yes, I'll go on this trip really changed the trajectory of my life in an amazing way. So that's where it started. Ended up on a trip over there. Got super involved into a widow and orphan ministry in Zambia and helping them get started, helping them start a 501c3 in the United States. And it really just became a passion project of mine and my wife, and just super excited to be involved in that. And through that, I would go over there and I would see these families, I would see these kids, and we would interact, and we would play soccer inevitably and things like that. But I would look at these boys, and I would look at these middle school, high school age boys, and think like, what are they going to become? Like, what do they have in their life that they can just follow and model? And I didn't see a lot. I didn't see a lot of strong like male Christian influences in their life that would lead them to a life of freedom through Christ, number one, but then also like as a father and as a husband, and what did that look like? So that's really where it started. My story intersected with a gentleman named Tom Carson, who is also an entrepreneur, had an inner city ministry in Atlanta. And one thing led to another. We teamed up and we were like, let's do this. Like, let's figure out how we're going to do it. And through various circumstances, we ended up in Uganda to do it. But I know a lot of the listeners, I know, Robby, you for sure, are big into small groups. And so our idea was like, how do we create a small group for these middle school, high school age boys that they would love to come to? We didn't want to start a church. We didn't want to interfere with anything else going on in the community, but we decided, hey, if they join a team, if they join a soccer team, then they're going to have a coach, and that coach can be their small group leader, and that coach can be their mentor that we were trying to do. So at the end of the day, what we were trying to do is like, hey, let's create a cool brand where people could come play soccer, and kids could join the league and join the team, and then they would be connected to that strong Christian male influence in their life, and that would be a coach. And so we started in 2011, so we've been around, I guess this is our 13th year of doing it. It's one of the most favorite things I get to do is be a part of that, and one of the things that I love about the ministry in itself is just bringing people over to Uganda, engaging people into the ministry. We have 10 campuses that we operate in the Kampala area. Each campus has about 7 coaches. So we have around 70 coaches who are all young men in their 20s, primarily a few guys in their 30s, but most of these guys are in their 20s. And it's all indigenously led, so they're all Ugandan guys, and we get the opportunity to invest in those men and to lead those men as they lead the kid and as they lead the children that they minister to. So that's kind of where we intersected. Our story, Robby, you and I, as we talked this week, was we're coming right on the heels of a trip that I've taken with a group of men that we started in 2019, and we've continued annually leading this trip to really focus on our staff and really focus on our coaches that we have over there, and we can unpack that a little bit more and things. But that's kind of the overview of the ministry and where we are.
So that started in 2019. I remember you invited me, and I was very sad I could not join because some of our mutual friends are in this group. So y'all went over for the first trip in 2019 to invest in the 70 coaches, to just kind of bless them as they bless the hundreds of students that they each interact with. Is that right?
Yeah, that was our initial idea. And obviously 70 coaches, that's a lot. We weren't planning on doing like a big conference or, like a big facility. So the one thing we did, which we still continue to do, is we just took a subset. We said, okay, who are, we asked our staff, like, let's pull out about 15 of these guys and start investing in those guys. And so that's what we did on the first trip. And that's what we continue to do, although we've kind of adapted to some other things. But essentially, we're going over, and in this past trip, we had 12 people. It ranges 12 to 15 people from the American side, but then we're investing in about 15 of our coaches when we go over.
So the first trip, y'all did this trip as a group of guys, and then y'all got into a cadence of meeting. Unpack the past. Has it been 4 years, 4 trips?
Yeah, we missed COVID. We missed the COVID year and things
Okay.
like that, but which would have been our second year. So we went. We were super excited to go back. And honestly, when we first went, I thought this was kind of like a beta trip to see if I can get a men's group to go over. And then so my idea was like, we're going to go over and then I'm going to find another group of 12 to 15 Americans and go do it again. And then, kind of my, American mentality of like, let's scale this thing. I was like, I'm just going to continue to bring over more and more men's trips. And what happened was the guys that went, they're like, no, you're not scaling this thing. We're coming back. So the guys you brought, we're going back and we're not going to let you get rid of us that easy. And so we just continued to meet monthly. And so the first Tuesday night of every month, after that trip, we would just meet, we would share stories, share different things that are on our heart. We'd meet in the backyard and around a fire pit, those kind of things. And just really start to unpack life together. And so we were super excited, because we were planning the 2020 trip and we had all these ideas that we wanted to do. And then COVID came and messed it all up. But we ended up going up to Pigeon Forge in Tennessee, and we rented a cabin. And because we couldn't go to Uganda, we still did our trip. It just happened to be in the mountains. And then we ended up doing a Skype call with some of our staff over there, and we had a church service and things like that. So we kind of made it our own. But since that point, we've essentially had the same core group of guys, and we've added some. We've lost a few, but we've added some along the way. But since 2019, we've met consistently, first Tuesday of every month, and really just sharing life together and doing that around a fire pit or whatever it may be, depending on the weather. But those have been real special, and the connectedness and the growth that we've seen just as a group has been really special too.
You've been around all kinds of community groups, Trueface journey groups. You've been, we do life together, and you've seen authentic community. But when we were talking about this last trip that you just went on a couple weeks ago, this was different. Unpack what you saw and what you're thinking about when it comes to what you saw.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big question, or not. It's a big answer, I guess. Let me back up just 1 minute because I've got a friend, and he started something with it's a secular idea where he gets business people or people in the industry or business industry, and he goes through a 12-week book, usually typically like a business book, but they go as a group, and they do it all through Slack and Zoom and like all these kind of things, but they're connected as a group, and these are people all over the country, and they do this, but at the end, there is this culminating retreat that's 4 days long, and they typically do some sort of big thing. So and it's typically exercise and outdoors and mountains and things like that involved, like 50-kilometer, trail runs and stuff like that. That they're all through that 12 weeks. They're training, they're talking, they're learning about each other. They're living this life together. And so I'm watching this from a secular perspective, and I'm like, man, this is really similar to what I'm doing with these guys in Uganda because of this experience that's on the end of the journey for the group. And so it was really cool to kind of watch him, and he's done like 3 or 4 of these events that he does, and he talks about like the connectedness and the community and the fellowship. And these people aren't even, like-minded in their faith necessarily. They're just people who are, and he tells stories of like life transformations from these guys that have like experienced this community. And so the conversations I've had with him over the last couple of years is he's done that, and then looking at our group and saying like, what is different? How can we be similar? At the end of the day, the one word that always comes to my mind is just this idea of freedom. And we've experienced this freedom. What is the Galatians 5? It's for freedom that Christ died. If we're not experiencing this freedom in our lives, I feel like we're not doing it right. Like that should be a fruit that we have. And I think the group of Americans that we go with, they've experienced that to a deep degree, and they've experienced it in a community of other brothers, which is our group. And so we go over there and we just want to give our coaches, let's just give them a taste of this freedom that we have in Christ. And all of our coaches are believers and things like that. But when you look at where they grew up and where they came from and the things that they dealt with as children in the context of growing up in these Ugandan villages or the Ugandan slums or the Ugandan city in Kampala, I would say 90% of them don't have a father figure in their life. 90% of them have no real relationship with kind of that older male influence that's going to impact them and things like that. And so as an organization, we're asking them to pour into kids and give them and show them what it looks like to live in this freedom. But they really haven't even unpacked a lot of these wounds and a lot of these things that they've dealt with going on in life. And so Robby, you and I had talked about this with the Trueface conversations that you put together, and it's a series of 8 conversations, and we use that as a framework for when we go over there. We use the we'll show, these conversations are like a 5-minute video that Robby put together. And so we'll use that and we'll give our own, our own spin on it, or maybe throw in some personal stories related to each of these conversations. And so we use it as a framework. But the other thing that we started doing just a few years ago was we would put 2 Americans with 2 Ugandans, and they would be a small group, and they would walk together throughout the whole week that we're together in the context of this small group. And so we create this really safe environment for the Ugandans to feel safe to share, but then also the Americans, they're safe as well to share. And the more we do it, and the more we connect with our staff and our coaches, and they start to understand. And every time we go, we have a different group of coaches, so we're not always doing it with the same coaches. The word gets out. So the other coaches are saying, you got to be ready, and they call it unmasking. They call it you got to be ready to unmask, which goes so well with the Trueface theme. But that's what we're doing. We're getting in those groups, and we're taking the mask off, and we're going deep from day one, and we're just going to continue that journey to the end. And it's super powerful in the context of that small group, and that having that safe space to know that whatever you say is not going to be held against you. There's no judgment there, but it's the old the old conversation of you're loved more for what you share and the vulnerability that you give, and you're just than you are if you're holding it back. And so that's the beauty of it, and that's what we experienced when we were there. It's pretty special.
It's fun. I've always got a couple texts from guys on some hill in Uganda at sunset, and then my face will be on the laptop showing the Trueface conversation, and they're like, "You're with us," and I'm like, "Ugh," but not really, from some of the guys. So hold on, I want to pull back because there's a dynamic here that, you're saying freedom is, this breath of fresh air, this posture, this environment that it's so freeing for the people that you have experienced with each other as a group, and then now you get to share that with the coaches in Uganda. Unpack the journey, because that has been a progressive level of trust in this group in regards to y'all experiencing the freedom and closeness as a group, but also individually as men. And you started this with talking about the other group that does 12 weeks and then culminates in something big. How is that a part of this equation?
Yeah. I think it's just the journey, the freedom comes from this idea that we can share and carry one another's burdens. And I think that's where what we realized in 2019 when we started meeting together, and all of us were on our same like on different journeys, and we've had even since then all kind of life change within the group. From rehab to divorces to new kids being born, whatever it is. Like there's all kind of things going on that we've navigated with each other. And it's been a pretty special and beautiful thing. And I think that's where to know you have a community and a group where you can, like I said before, just have a safe space to share these things that are going on. It just creates a connectedness that allows for that freedom to take place, because there's so many things that we kind of just put on ourselves. The chains and the heavy stuff that we walk around with, and we just get used to walking around with this heaviness. And the whole time, there's a formula that we can kind of go through. And honestly, the Trueface conversations is kind of the formula. You talk about trusting God and trusting others, and the whole thing that we go through. It's when you put that into practice, you slowly start to remove some of these chains and some of these things that we walk around with, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, I feel 100 pounds lighter. And that's what we get to experience over a long period of time with this group, but then we get to experience it in a short period of time with these Ugandan guys and see them live that out as well.
I've been working with small groups, authentic community, high trust environments for a long time. Like what leads to it? What's the equation? The story you told about the other company that culminates in some really challenging thing. Your group, we've seen all kinds of systems, processes work for small groups. Like some work, some don't work. Like really understanding the different principles underpinning high trust environments. This one's different. Y'all are meeting once a month. It's an eclectic group of guys, different ages, but it really started in Uganda. What have you been thinking about and learning? Because I think in a lot of small group environments, I've been thinking how we underweight. Is it challenge? Is it mission? Is it shared experiences? Like I'm trying to figure out, God, like how significant is that principle as we live in community with other brothers and sisters in Christ, in our local churches, in our friends group? Which one of those is it in your opinion? Because there's one of those elements. Is it the mission? Is it the hard things together? Yeah, there's something in that differentiates this group.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time trying to understand that as well. I think it's honestly both. And I'll tell you why. I think the mission is important. And even in the secular group, it's like they're on mission for this big thing at the end or whatever. And that's the same for us. Like we are on mission. Like we know what we're doing. We know why we're there. We know what the goals we want to achieve and those kind of things. And we've spent the time, those Tuesday night meetings, like we're spending the time in preparation for the ultimate goal of the trip and going over there. And I think that lacks sometimes in the small group environments that I've been in that don't have it. It's like, it's a men's group, it's a married group or whatever. And you just kind of do the next book study or you do the next thing, but there's really no there's no thing out there that we're all working towards as a group. And I think that is a solidifying thing. You think about, a football team, or you think about like a sporting team where there's like, okay, the playoffs is the mission, the Super Bowl is the mission, whatever. Like you're working towards that. And sometimes you're going to fall short. Sometimes you're going to reach it. But when you reach it as a group and as a unit or whatever, then that's like, the people that have experienced that understand like that's a very special thing. And so the mission is very important. I think it's probably the more important piece. Secondarily, I think the struggle or, because people will say, well, why do you got to go to Uganda to do like you can do whatever, and 30 hours of travel, 6-hour bus rides, it's uncomfortable. The leg, for tall people, like the leg room's always challenging, and like it's, we're older guys, and so it's everybody's got on like sleeping masks for so they don't die in their sleep and stuff. So like and people are snoring, like we're all together, like there is this struggle, different time zones. We're plus 8 hours, so you're not sleeping well. There is a struggle piece to this that's a unifier as well, that I think we were talking about that as a group on one of the last nights. It's a big piece. It's a big piece to it, because you kind of have to band together, and there's no point where you can just tap out and go home.
Yep. You think about like special forces, like there's no deeper like in it with you than special forces community. I know it's a surprise for a lot of people watching on YouTube, looking at my physique. I've been making a lot of jokes for the YouTube community, but I've never been in special forces. I would last one day. However, like I'm fascinated by them, because it's like those guys, like a good friend of mine, Josh, who I'm hanging out with tonight, was a ranger, Korengal Valley. And we talk about, maybe I'll have him on the podcast to talk about like what is missing. Like these guys miss something, because the longings of our hearts are to be known, and we can be, so that we can be loved, because we can be loved to the degree that we're known. And there's a depth of being known that is accelerated through struggle and through mission. You're right, it is both. I mean, they have mission and they have struggle. And even AA, like there's a mission and a struggle. Another environment that has incredible environments of trust. It's less brotherhood, but there's an authentic richness of trust and freedom that you experience in AA, where it's like, because we have a mission, a shared cause to pursue a life of sobriety, and there's a brokenness, a difficulty in the struggle of maintaining sobriety. There's a lot of ministries are doing this well right now. I think missional communities is, I think a lot of different house church planning networks, different churches, that's an approach or philosophy underpinning small group that just is more small group that puts more emphasis on a shared missional cause, which is awesome. And I think a lot of us, at least I have put too little emphasis on that in our circles of relationships as the local church, as we gather together with other believers. And I don't know how much of that is just human nature and how much of that is comfort and the pursuit of comfort in a Western Christianity or a consumerist perspective. I mean, that's a whole nother 3 podcasts. But I think there's a missing element that you're getting a taste of in a lot of our communities, in our families even. Does my family have struggle and mission? Because I want that level of connection and depth in my own personal family.
Yeah. There was a point, one of the last days, I looked at one of the guys, Jay Stewart, who we both know, and I looked at him and I'm like, is this what it was like for the early apostles, the early followers of Jesus in Acts? Because there was just such a depth of closeness among brothers with a like-minded cause. It's hard to put words around it, but there was like this love that was deeper than I've experienced from people that are not my family, or, those kind of things. It was just like this deep love, appreciation for these brothers on mission, doing something in this remote town in Uganda that was very special, and we were just kind of reveling in that moment of like, wow, this is impactful. And one of the things we do on the very last session is, and this is part of the conversations, is the affirmation exercise, which we call the blessing. And so for a group of 20-something-year-old men in Uganda who have grown up without a lot of family unit, especially father figures and that whole thing, to have older men who put their hands on them in a safe space in their circle and just speak words of life and affirmation and blessing over them. Some of the Ugandan men like had to go off and just like take 10 minutes by themselves to process what had just happened. Very emotional moment, very just spirit filled like moment for a lot of these guys and for us. And it's like we're just looking around saying like, number one, it's just a blessing and a gift that we're a part of this. But number two, it's like, this is what this was kind of our Super Bowl. It was like, this is what we were here to do. And this is our mission. And we accomplished our mission. And these guys are seeing freedom through Christ through these conversations. And so it's just very special. And it's hard, like you said, like, this is not a scalable thing where you can just write a script and say, do these 5 things. And this is going to be, this is all going to work. I didn't tell the story how we got started. We started with 5 guys. I recruited 4 other guys to say, hey, can we do a men's trip to Uganda? And we started with these 5 core guys. And then each one of us asked one guy that we felt like could use a little bit of a let's get out there and do something kind of crazy and go to Uganda kind of thing. So we multiplied to 10. And so it was like an organic, like, the people we invited in were people we felt like God put on our heart in that moment to say, yeah, this is the guy I think God wants me to ask. And so anybody who's come into the fold since then has kind of been in the same thing. It's like, we're all kind of needing this, and then we see it and we feel it and we go for it and we do it together. So it's been really special, like I keep saying, but the mission and that culminating point was really, it was really something I never had experienced before. And like you said, I've done a lot of group stuff in the past.
Yeah, I still don't know why Jay Stewart's the one you made you think of that level of like, is this the way the apostles felt? Maybe it's because he like looks more like what you think an apostle would look like compared to like Scott Dubois, but I'm still connecting.
I'm glad you said all that, not me.
Jay kind of looks like Peter in The Chosen.
Yeah.
That, like you could work that together.
He's definitely going on the poster when we do the advertisement. He's the only guy that can really fit the poster mold. In
a short sleeve shirt to show his biceps. Is he the only guy in the group that has biceps, and that's why you thought of him as an apostle? Because now we have The Chosen in our head. So I think, I think this mission and shared struggle, and even what you just said about the script wouldn't work because that would take away the mission and the struggle and the adventure of it. So when it comes to, as we land the plane for this Trueface tribe, listening to this, thinking about how this meets a longing in our hearts to align community, our needs of being known, and significance, and partnering with God on this adventurously expectant journey of trusting him and being a part of the work he's doing in the kingdom. What do you hope us listening take away from what you're experiencing and learning? And what do we do with that in our own churches, communities, families?
Yeah, I think everybody's on a different place, obviously, in life. And for me, my life took a 180-degree turn when I said yes to an invitation. And that invitation was something that I was not comfortable with. It was something outside of my comfort zone. And I think that's just one thing. I mean, that's a low bar step of like, what are the opportunities that may have come, passed by that you had said no to, or maybe what, in your church or your group environments or whatever, like what are those opportunities you can say yes to? That's one thing. I think the other thing is if you are in a group, maybe have some conversations within the group of like, what can we do to be more on mission? Like, what is something that we can put out there that's in the future that we can shoot towards and go for? And It could be ministry related, could be running a 50K. I don't know. But like, what are those things that maybe you can add into your current group environment? It could be a mission trip, like at the end of it or whatever that can bring you together. Because that's what like we're saying, like that's what I've seen with like the experiences that we have are just so much more solid and solidified through these challenges that we put ourselves through. So I would say that maybe I'm missing something. You can add on something else, but I mean, those things just are the two things off the top of my head.
I love that. And I think about all of our little pockets, our 2s, our 3s, our 8s, as we gather together as brothers and sisters. That question of like, God, you have gifted us differently, different passions, burdens, and you have invited us to partner with you in the work you're doing. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, as a joy, not as a should or need to, but as an opportunity to partner. So what do you want for me personally? And what do you want? Is there something collectively for this group? Like that, if there's something like inviting him is a scary thing to go, God, what could this group do in partnering with you for loving others?
Yeah.
For being your hands and feet, for whatever that is. Is there something? Asking him that is a scary thing in a group. I mean, I'm picturing most small groups to actually do that and listen and then process and prayerfully discern, okay, let's do this. And because it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be without struggle or commitment. If it's anything of significance enough, that would be missional. And so that's a scary thing. I'm personalizing this as you said that to my own group of like, yeah, let's do this. God, what do you want? Let's ask him and listen, and then have the practice the faith step and trusting him with that.
I mean, in your small group, I mean, what does it cost you to show up every, Thursday night or whatever? Like it's not costing you a lot. And I think there is a level of when something costs you something, you typically get more out of that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's definitely a challenge for us all to think about.
I love it. Scott, is there anything in our friendship, we'll talk offline, like, are we missional as brothers? Is there something, you'll just say, come to Uganda, and I'm not, because Emily doesn't let me travel in this season, although I want to, but you'll protect me anyways from traveling because that's what brothers do. So you're in a bind anyways. Now we're squirreling. Y'all, this was so much fun. Scott, I'm so thankful for your friendship and intentionality in my own life. And if anybody wants to buy your book, he told me not to say this, which is why I keep saying it. It's called Here's the Question on Amazon. I have it and I use it and I enjoy it. It's random questions to facilitate conversation at the table. Or if you want to learn about real estate investing, hit up Scott Bowen on LinkedIn and give 10% of your proceeds to Trueface as a broker referral fee. How about that?
That sounds good. I appreciate you, Robby, as you know. I appreciate Trueface, the materials, the conversations, really just the mindset around what Trueface presents has been life-changing personally for me, for my family, and then also these men that we've and now you're impacting Uganda. So it's cool to be a part of that in a small way, and it's real fun to do it with a good buddy.
It is. All right. Thanks, y'all.